Hey everyone,
Hey everybody.
welcome to another Travel Therapy Mentor video. Tonight we're doing a job market update. Gonna update you guys. It's been 5 months now since our last job market update. It's been a while since we did one. We try to do them quarterly, but there's a couple reasons why. One, no huge changes, so I mean, kind of crazy to come in here and rehash the same stuff over and over. But we want to update you at least regularly on that. The other thing is we've been moving recently, so that's been really busy. It's kind of crazy that we moved all around the country, all around the world, but moving everything, like packing and moving our whole townhouse to a new house, was a pretty big undertaking. We forgot how hard it is to like pack and move actual furniture instead of just packing our travel stuff. So we've been pretty busy, but we got a pretty good update. So hopefully this will be good information for you guys, the current travelers, and also people looking into travel, trying to decide if it's a good time to travel for you.
All right, so we'll do some quick introductions here, and then we'll hop into the job market update. So for those that may not know us, my name is Whitney,
I'm Jared.
and we're both traveling doctors of physical therapy. We've been travel PTs for about 10 years now. We haven't been traveling this past year because we had a baby, and we've been spending most of our time at home in Virginia. As Jared just mentioned, we did move to a new house, so you'll recognize some new digs here for the background. We're still kind of getting unpacked and settled in. We've only been at our new house for 2 weeks. So we'll play around with kind of if we're going to keep this same background or do something different. Right now, we're kind of in the guest bedroom slash office. We did just move within our hometown, so just kind of across town, nothing crazy. But yeah, we've been traveling on and off for 10 years. We've been all over the country. We've worked in 5 states. We have been to all 50 states for fun. We've been to all the national parks. We've traveled all around the world in our free time between travel contracts. We have relationships with a lot of different travel staffing companies. So we know recruiters, owners, CEOs, managers at about 15 different companies that we have relationships with. So we, keep our thumb on the pulse of the travel therapy job market and kind of what's happening. We also talk to a lot of current and aspiring travelers and mentor them. We've mentored thousands over the years. So we have a pretty good idea of, what's happening in the travel therapy job market and what's going on. So we started doing these job market updates, I think in 2019, even pre-COVID. And then we've kind of kept them up over the years just to give you guys some insights about what's happening. Is now a good time to travel? Are there things that you need to look out for? That sort of thing. So hopefully this will be helpful for those of you that are thinking about getting into travel therapy, as well as those of you that are currently traveling and wondering, what to anticipate for the upcoming year. If any of you guys are joining in live, we are live tonight on Facebook and Instagram. We'd love if you just say hi in the comments, and shout out to those of you that will listen later on our podcast and our YouTube channel. We appreciate your support there as well.
Yep. So no huge changes in terms of the job market. Things are still really good. We've been saying this for, I don't know, probably 3 years now, that this is a great time to travel for most people. Way better than when we started 10 years ago, way better than even most pre-COVID, especially right after COVID. It's a really good time to travel right now. All the companies basically are seeing a lot of strength, a lot of job openings. If anything, the issue that most companies tell us is that they need to find more therapists to fill these jobs. So it's definitely a therapist market right now, which is what you really want if you are a current traveler or an aspiring traveler.
Yeah, and that's especially the case, as you'll see as we go through some of these questions and job numbers. Physical therapists have still been the highest demand since after COVID. There was really a peak of demand for therapists, I'd say in like 22, and even through 23. And then 24 and 25, it's been very strong, not quite as high as it was in 22, but still very strong. So physical therapists are in the highest demand because PT, physical therapy as a field, is really high demand right now. That also means there's been an increase in the demand for physical therapist assistants. So it's been a really good market, even better than pre-COVID in our experience for PTAs.
One thing we get questions about very often on these, we're going to talk about the numbers in a second, but we get questions really often like, why is the PT market so strong and OT and SLP is not as strong, or why is PTA strong and CODA is not as strong? No one really knows why, but I would say our best guess for why that is that there has been a really huge demand the last 5 years for outpatient physical therapy, whether that's like post-surgical or people with chronic illnesses that were exacerbated during 2020. The demand for outpatient specifically has really increased, and outpatient is more common for PTs in general. So a lot of these clinics that you see are very desperate for for PTs right now. And so they're trying to get travelers because they just need anyone in there to do evals and stuff. So it seems like to us and to a lot of the companies, the reason PT demand is so much higher than OT or SLP, which that wasn't the case pre-COVID. That it was like equal, and in some cases PT was less in demand than the other settings or the other disciplines, is primarily driven by outpatient. There's been an explosion in outpatient PT needs.
Yeah, and we've talked about this before in some of the past job market updates about why we think that might be. As Jared mentioned, on the patient side, there could be some changes in the types of patients and the amount of patients following COVID, and then also with the baby boomer generation aging. I think that also something to do with the staffing in general. It seems to us from talking to a lot of physical therapists over the years that many of them are getting burnout in the outpatient setting and leaving the outpatient setting. We also think that due to a lot of the layoffs in 2020, that a lot of the outpatient clinics lost staff and never regained it. So these are some of the things that we project are why there's more demand for outpatient therapists. So if you are an outpatient PT, you have a lot of opportunities for jobs these days. Back when we were traveling full-time, we don't travel full-time anymore, but when we worked full-time from 2015 to 2018, we wanted outpatient jobs all the time, and it was harder to find them. And so now people are like, great, there's a lot of outpatient jobs, but we do want you to be wary that they're not all great outpatient jobs. Again, some of the reason why some of these outpatient jobs are open is because the permanent staff didn't want to be there anymore, because a lot of the outpatient clinics are requiring too high a volume. They're requiring you to double book and triple book, and they want you to bill a certain number of units so that they can keep their doors open. And some of this is driven by reimbursement rates, unfortunately. With reimbursement rates going down, inflation and their costs to run the clinic are going up. They're having to get more patients in the door to stay afloat. And a lot of physical therapists don't want to work in that model anymore. So we don't really know what the future of outpatient physical therapy is going to be, unfortunately, but that is a lot of where they're needing travelers now because they don't have staff.
Yep. Okay, so some of the current numbers. So these aren't huge changes from March 2025 is the last time we did a job market update. So for PT right now, there's anywhere between 350 and 1,100 open jobs in the country. For OT, there's anywhere between 100 and 250. For SLP, there's anywhere from 100 to 450. For PTA, 150 to 300. And for CODA, 50 to 120. And probably a lot of you that haven't watched videos before are wondering why there's such a wide range. The reason there's a big range is some companies have a lot more jobs than others. So like Whitney said, we work with about 15. These numbers are from, I think, 11 or 12 companies sent us data. The smaller companies very often have less jobs open. They don't have as much opportunity to find all of these travel jobs, whereas big companies often have a ton of jobs. So there's pros and cons working with big and small companies, but in general, big companies have more job openings than small companies have. So when you see like PT, the range 350 to 1,100, 350, that's some of the small companies we work with. They don't have as many openings, whereas 1,100, the higher end jobs, those are big companies that have, just tons of different connections from probably many years being in business.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and so, that's something that we always like to mention here too, and we always suggest this to our followers. We recommend that you work with more than one company, because if you are only working with one company, you are limiting your job options. In addition to just seeing the plain numbers here, you can see that some companies only have around 300 PT jobs, while some companies have over 1,000. Not only the volume, but the types of jobs and the diversity of jobs within those. They may not all have access to the same 300 or 400 jobs. Some of them are going to be different. So it benefits you to work with more than one company so you can make sure that you're seeing all the available job options that you can. Now, there comes a point where it's probably not a good idea to work with too many companies, because you will eventually see enough overlap that you've seen all the jobs and there's no added benefit, diminishing returns there. So we usually recommend about 2 or 3 companies is a good amount.
Yeah, and a big part of like what size company to work with, people ask us these types of questions. Should I work with a small company, a mid-sized company, a big company? A lot of it also depends on, one, what you're looking for, but 2, how specific you are. If you want something very specific and you go with a company that doesn't have many jobs, it's going to be really hard to find what you want unless they specifically specialize in that area. Whereas if you want something broad, say you want your PT and you're open to any skilled nursing or any home health, well, you can work with a tiny company. They're going to have options for you. So it really depends on you, what you're looking for, what settings you want, what locations you want. There's really not a one-size-fits-all answer. And there's, like I said, there's pros and cons to big companies, small companies, mid-sized companies. So that's why we work with a range, and why when people contact us for recommendations, we will send you a range of companies. It's not just going to be only small companies, only big companies. It's going to be a mix.
Yeah. And there's some different strategies there. So if you're looking for something very specific, it might benefit you to work with a bigger company that has more job options because they might be more likely to have it. It may also benefit you to work with a small company that is going to be the type of company to do what we call cold calling, where they're going to actually, if you say, I only want, this one city in Nevada or whatever, they're just going to only call around to clinics for you and try to market you in that one city. Now that is kind of rare to come by these days. I think that used to be the way that a lot of the staffing companies were. But these days, a lot of them don't do that. They're like, we have this big database of jobs. That's a waste of our time to be calling around for just one candidate when we could be, fitting people into these other 1,000 jobs that we already have. But again, that's a good reason to work with a couple different companies. So you got this big one that's got a big database of jobs for you to choose from. And then maybe this small kind of niche company is willing to get on the phone and call around for you.
Yep. Okay, so those numbers I listed off there, how does that compare to March? Very, very similar. There's just a slight decrease basically throughout compared to the numbers before, but not even big enough that any of the companies even mentioned that. We just picked that up through the data that we collected.
Yeah.
So very, very close in terms of job numbers and job availability compared to 5 months ago.
Yep. And yeah, pretty much steady across 2024 as well. Those numbers were right in the same range. So it looks like from 2024 to 2025, there really hasn't been any major fluctuation in the volume of needs for travel therapists, which is a good thing.
Yep.
We did get a question over on Instagram, and I'll go ahead and answer that now. If anybody else has any questions as we go through, feel free to pop that in the comments. What's the best way to ask why they need a travel therapist during an interview? Yeah, you have to just be savvy, kind of see how the interview is going. You can say, you can just ask them if you want. You can say, what's the reason why you have a current opening?
Yeah, there's no problem with that. I mean, that is good information for you to ask anyway.
Yeah, and so they might say something like, oh, someone just quit, or we've just been having trouble finding staff, or we just have an increase in volume during this time of year. There sometimes is a seasonality to jobs. Maybe they have more, snowbirds in the winter that come or whatever it might be. So yeah, it doesn't hurt to ask during the interview. I guess it just depends on how straightforward you want to be, how you would go about asking.
You could also ask questions like, have you used travelers in the past? And if they say no, then you say, oh, well, what changed? Or, that kind of thing. Mm-hmm. Or if they say yes, you say, you can follow up based on, the questions you ask and what their response is.
Yeah. And if you're worried, if you're worried that it's a bad clinic and that's why they haven't had staff, if they say, yeah, we've been using, we've been having trouble, try to find out a little more. Oh, well, how many current permanent staff do you have there? And, is it just the one opening you're having trouble filling, or no one wants to work there? That kind of thing. You can just find out too. Maybe sometimes it's just a rural place and they just don't have a lot of qualified candidates in that rural area. Or maybe it's just oversaturated. It's a big city and they don't have enough therapists to go around for all the clinics in the area. Yeah. But I think you're going to want to ask more questions. They're not necessarily going to divulge, oh, it's a bad clinic, that's why we need travelers. You're going to find out more if it's a bad clinic in the other questions that you're asking, like about caseload and documentation,
support staff.
Yes, those types of things. So you have to deduce, what do you think defines a bad clinic, and go off the answers they give you, because they'll try to make it sound great. They'll be like, yeah, sometimes the therapists do have trouble getting all their documentation done while they're here, but that's okay because they just take their laptops home. It's a great place to work. And you're like, ding, ding, ding. Like, that doesn't sound like a great place to work because I'm not going to take my laptop home to get the documentation done.
Yeah. Yeah. And like Whitney said, even if you ask that question, so you might say, do you use a lot of travelers? And they'll be like, oh yeah, we have constant travelers here. And you might think, oh, that's a bad thing. But like she said, it could be a rural clinic where they just can't hire perm staff. And we've been to plenty of those clinics where they just use constant travelers. And you might think it would be bad, but I mean, out of all the clinics we've gone to, some of my favorite ones were those types of clinics. So that doesn't mean it's a bad clinic. It could just mean that they have trouble getting people there because it's not a real desirable area.
Yeah. And we've also had a lot of friends, like, especially in California, there's just so many facilities. We've had some friends that are like, I work with 7 other travelers at this clinic, and it is so much fun. Like, we have this group of friends, Martin and Kelly and a bunch of other ones, Wagner and Dana. They all move around, and one of them will find a good clinic that they like working at, and then they're like, we need 3 other travelers, and then they'll like get the other ones in there, and they have the most fun. And I'm like, I've never worked at a clinic that needed 5 or 6 or 7 or 8 travelers, but apparently in California there are some.
Yeah.
And they've worked at a lot of them. And it doesn't mean it's a bad clinic. It's just, they just don't have enough staff. So yeah, you're just going to find that out through the other questions, I think, that you ask. A follow-up question here is, I got a job offer without interviewing. Is this common? I haven't accepted it yet.
It's not common, but it definitely is usually a red flag. Not always a red flag, but usually because, well, one, never accept a job without interviewing, because the interview is way more for you to find out if it's a good fit for you than it is for them. So if the company doesn't want to interview, that might just mean that they're desperate and they just want to get anybody in there, which could be a bad thing. So I would never take a job. I would never accept a job without interviewing. Just as an anecdotal experience, the only job we ever took without interviewing, this was probably back in 2017, was our least favorite contract ever. So just be careful with that. Make sure you interview, ask a lot of detailed questions, figure out what's going on.
Are you talking about the one that you didn't interview for?
Yeah, I guess so.
I interviewed, and then they just said, yeah, we'll take him too.
Okay, yeah. Okay.
So at least I interviewed, but
Yeah.
it still ended up being a bad job. So anyway, those were the job numbers, the ranges that we received from the companies that we asked. So again, it was PT anywhere from 300 to 1,100 jobs, OT anywhere from 100 to 250, SLP 100 to 450, PTA 150 to 300, CODA 50 to 120. So as you can see, a lot more PT jobs, and then kind of next would be SLP, OT, PTA, CODA.
Yep.
All right, so the next thing we ask is, in general, how has the therapy market been for 2025? And this is where most of the companies told us that it has been very steady, very strong. It's been really high demand for therapists.
The most common answer was about the same. Like we said, the numbers are pretty similar. The pay rates are pretty similar to how they've been the last 2 years. And but there was a couple that said that it was better, and then I think one that said it was slightly down. So in general, about the same, probably leaning towards improving. But like we've said for a couple of years now, improving, it doesn't really need to improve. It's already a really great market. Pay rates are really high, lots of jobs. So staying the same is a good thing.
Yep. We've been asking this for the last couple of years, and Jared mentioned today it's probably time that we just kind of quit asking this. We always ask, how does this job market compare to pre-2019, pre-COVID? Because as travelers who started in 2015, we felt like we had this like good idea of the 2015 to 2020 market. And then we're always kind of wondering, like, are we back there, or are we better than that? So we always ask them, how does the current job market compare to the pre-2020 market? But consistently, the answer has been that it's so much better now. And I think it's stayed stronger. And so I think that now we just kind of need to leave that in the past and realize, okay, we've rebounded from that dip that we had in 2020 and 2021. We're back to normal, if not better than normal.
Yeah, it took about 3 years to get back to what it was in 2019, but now consistently it's been better.
But there is something interesting that a couple of them mentioned, and they said that the ones that have been in the business for 10 plus years, like us, they said that now they are seeing more jobs these days, these past couple of years, that are running through MSPs and VMS. Compared to before, they had a lot more direct clients. So for those that aren't familiar with MSPs and VMS, what these stand for, MSP is Managed Service Provider, and VMS is Vendor Management System. In essence, what this means for us and for the recruiters is that these jobs are going through kind of like a database. Like you explain it really well, I think.
So if you were imagine yourself as a clinic or a hospital, and you know there's 200 travel companies out there. Most of the clinics, they don't want to just go to one company and hope that they have a good candidate. So what they do is they go to these companies that aggregate a bunch of jobs together, and they say, hey, I need to fill this position. And they will list, the aggregator will list that on their site or their list that they send out to all the companies. And then the companies will submit candidates to those jobs. So instead of a clinic just getting candidates from one travel company, now they're getting candidates from every company that has access to those jobs. So for a clinic, they get a much wider range of applicants. And so it works out better for them. From the therapist side, it's a little bit of, I would say, like, there's pros and cons, but I would say it's mostly cons for us, because these systems that aggregate all the jobs together, they take a pretty big fee for doing that. So in order to fill these jobs and submit these candidates, they take somewhere between 5 and 10% of the bill rate that the travel company would receive, which then decreases the pay that the therapist gets. So kind of a downside for us, but it's a very good thing for the clinics because they get more candidates.
Yeah, and I mean for the travel companies, they're looking at it mostly like a bad thing if they are not the one who owns the MSP. If they're one of the big companies that owns the MSP, it's a good thing because they get first dibs on it, and they don't have to pay a fee to anyone because they own it. Now, if they're a smaller company who has to go through the VMS or the MSP to get to the job, well, then they can't pay the traveler as much money. And also it means that there's going to be more people applying from all over the place to that job. And so there's more competition for that job. Whereas if it's a direct client and you happen to be working with the recruiter and the company that has the direct relationship, and maybe that facility only direct contracts with 3 different travel agencies, well, then there's less competition for you and it's easier to get your foot in the door, and there's less fees, so that means that the travel company makes more money and you make more money.
On the other hand, though, looking at it from a perspective of a travel company, if they didn't have these MSPs and VMSs with these huge lists of jobs, they might only have 50 jobs because it would only be ones that they've made direct connections with through the facility. So there's pros and cons for them too, because the direct ones, yes, it is easier for them. They're able to pay more, but for the ones listed on these job databases, they have access to hundreds more jobs than they would have had otherwise. So it's also kind of beneficial for them as well.
The other con I would say as a traveler is that sometimes there's more hoops to jump through if it goes through an MSP or VMS, because you have to make sure that you have every single thing submitted the way they want it submitted, or your application will get kicked back. Whereas we've applied for some direct jobs with only our resume. Like if the travel therapy recruiter has a direct connection to the manager, sometimes we can just hand them our resume and it's just like instant that you're applying for this job instead of having to do all this other stuff. And sometimes they'll go ahead and interview you. The direct client will go ahead and interview you and offer you the job, and then they'll be like, we'll worry about all that other stuff on the back end. Like, we'll get all your other paperwork figured out later. So there's pros and cons. Like, having access to more jobs is a good thing, but it is easier to work with direct clients.
So, and as a traveler, you would always prefer a direct contract over a VMS contract, but it's not like you can choose which ones you get because often the jobs are going to be through these databases anyway.
But it's just, from a facility standpoint, they've had to go this direction a lot. It was always that a lot of the hospital systems were doing it, because if the hospital system has multiple locations, they need to get their jobs out there, and they don't have time to just be working one-on-one with these staffing companies. And so now a lot of the outpatient groups, like big companies like ATI and I don't know,
Athletico,
Benchmark and whoever, they're starting to do VMSs because now suddenly they have thousands of outpatient clinics throughout the country that need staff. And so they're like, well, we got to streamline this process. So yeah, there's pros and cons to it. In general, as a traveler, it's a good idea, as we always say, to keep your options open by working with more than one staffing agency. So you'll get a good variety of both direct and VMS, MSP jobs.
Yep.
But anyway, the answer to that question was the job market is stronger than it was pre-COVID. We'll probably stop addressing that moving forward because we just feel like it's a much better job market. Therapists are in very strong demand over the last 3 to 4 years.
Yep. So then we wanted to ask, what do they foresee for the travel therapy market over the next 36 months? And again, this has been the case too for a couple of years now, but everyone is saying that they expect it to be really steady or improving. That was pretty much across the board. Everybody said that, either consistent or improving demand. So no red flags or no issues there that we see.
Yeah, and the only thing that we talk about every year is as we get closer to the holidays, there does tend to be just a little bit of a slowdown, and that's across the board. That's because people at the facilities take time off for the holidays. People at the staffing companies take time off for the holidays. You take time off for the holidays. So it's just harder to book and start a job around the holidays. So because the job market is so good, if you know that you want to start a job in early 2026, you can go ahead and be starting to talk to recruiters this fall. And quite often they're going to be able to go ahead and book you into a job for January. That didn't always used to be the case. A lot of times it was that you had to wait until December to book into a January job. But because especially physical therapists are in such high demand, you might be able to book into a January start in September, October, November. So go ahead and reach out to us if you're looking to get connected with recruiters for a January start. But if you wait until December, might get kicked down the road a little bit until January because there might just not be people working to get your application in and get you starting. So it's a good idea to go ahead and just get that booked ahead of time. If you wait until January 1st, now you're looking at like the third or fourth week of January before you're probably going to be able to start, because that whole first week of January, like nobody works. You're not really going to get much done and get all your credentialing done and all that stuff in order to be able to start January, whatever that first, working day is. Let me just look at that real quick. So the first is on a Thursday. So probably most people are going to say, oh, I want to start Monday, January 5th. Okay, we'll go ahead and be talking to recruiters October, November to be able to try to secure your January 5th start date. Let's see here.
Okay, so then we asked what settings currently have the highest demand for PTs, for OTs, and for SLPs. For PT, like we mentioned, outpatient is very high demand right now. So there's a lot of outpatient jobs open. For OT, I guess in addition for PTs, there's always a lot of demand for SNF and home health. For OT, hospitals, skilled nursing, for SLP, schools, and skilled nursing
for the most part. Yeah. So if you are a therapist who likes to work in skilled nursing, long-term care, there's always high demand for that setting. But again, those jobs aren't always the best. Just depends. Some nursing homes, some skilled nursing are great to work in, some are not. You always just have to ask those good questions during the interview, but you're always going to find long-term care jobs in all settings. It is harder to come by hospital, and I did see, I think Allie mentioned in a comment how occupational therapy acute care jobs have been hard to come by, getting worse and worse, she says. Yeah, so for whatever reason, it has been harder to come by hospital jobs.
Yeah.
We get a lot of people asking us about like specialty, like neuro, inpatient rehab. Those have always been kind of the harder ones to come by. So, they are out there, but it is good to know like which companies tend to have more. Some of these companies that have like the MSPs for the bigger hospital systems, you're going to have better luck getting your foot in the door. If you are a newer graduate who's thinking about getting into acute care or inpatient rehab, usually the best way to get your foot in the door as a newer grad is to be willing to work at a more rural acute care hospital, like a regional hospital. Get your foot in the door in a rural hospital, and then you'll get that on your resume, get some experience, and then move up to a more urban or higher level, like trauma center hospital.
The next thing we asked about was, are they seeing any changes in rates, either increasing, decreasing, or staying the same? The majority of companies said that rates are staying about the same, pretty consistent throughout the year. One company said that skilled nursing rates, they're seeing some declines in those, which is not a good thing because skilled nursing already pays the lowest usually. Yeah. And also is probably the least desirable setting. So there's a lot of skilled nursing jobs that are sitting open for months and months at a time because no one wants to take the jobs. But yeah, rates are staying pretty good. There's a few that are saying rates are increasing. Most are saying that it's still staying pretty steady. So like we've said in the past, the rates are the highest we've ever seen it traveling consistently. There was a time period there in like 21, 22 when it was just like crazy stuff happening and things were all out of whack that you would see these really high pay rates. But in terms of average pay rates, this is the best it's been in 10 years or more, probably ever.
Yeah, so if you started in 2022, you might think that the rates have declined. But I mean, they may have dropped off just slightly from 22, where we were seeing a lot more $2,500 plus a week, $3,000 plus a week. But even right now, like we have a couple jobs on our list that are $3,000 a week, but that's more the exception, I would say. Yeah. I would say it used to be we would say don't take below $1,500 after tax as a physical therapist. These days, $1,500 is pretty low. I would say low. Probably not going to be taking less than $1,700 a week, and that's going to be for somewhere like Florida or Alabama that like the something rates are kind of low.
But for most jobs, you're probably not going to be taking less than $2,000. And I mean, if you really are looking for the highest pay you can get, you can probably find most contracts could be $23, $25, maybe even $2,700 a week, depending on how flexible you are in terms of setting.
Yeah, I'm seeing on our hot jobs list right now, we have a few that are up in the 3,000s, but those are like very specific, like Alaska and California. Some of them, I'd say that probably the lowest we have on our job list is like the 1,900 range for PT. So that's really good. I mean, we never were making 2,000 plus back in 2015 through 2018. So definitely a lot of opportunities for 2,000 plus for PT. For OT and SLP, you can make that. Some of them are going to be, again, if you're very specific, you're not going to necessarily see over 2,000, but there are quite a few over 2,000. And we're even seeing some like PTA and CODA jobs up in like the 1,700s, which is like a PT rate. So
Yeah.
that's really good. All right. Again, if you guys are watching live, we'd love if you just hit the thumbs up button. Let us know you're watching. Say hi in the comments. That applies later on too if you want to watch the replay on Instagram, Facebook, or YouTube. If you just say hi in the comments and let us know if you watched, we'd really appreciate it. And if you have any questions, if you are watching live, we'll be happy to answer them. All right, so rates are still pretty strong across the board. Any change in contract cancellation? So this is something we like to ask because we want you all to know whether or not the job market is steady and consistent. And if you're going to take the leap to get into travel therapy, are you going to have a secure job opportunity, or are you likely to be canceled? So the good news is they're saying that there's a very low rate of cancellations across the board. Every now and then it happens. But for the most part, they're saying these facilities need travelers, and when they're booking a traveler, they're keeping the traveler. For the most part, they're saying if there were any cancels, it was probably more on the therapist side, that the therapist had some opportunity that they chose to leave and cancel the contract, not vice versa. So again, kind of a therapist market here.
Yep.
All right, looks like we got some questions coming in. Someone on Instagram says, be aware though, at 3K, the rate is higher, so the taxable portion is higher. You might not bring home as much as you think in comparison of a job that's paying a little lower.
So all the jobs we list, at least on our job list, that's take-home pay. So that already accounts for the taxable rates being higher and after tax rates. So yeah, if you're talking to companies that list or give you pay rates in terms of gross pay, then that would definitely apply. But for any of the ones you see on our website, they should be net pay.
Let's see here. Someone on Instagram wants to know, are there more traveling occupational therapists than there are jobs available? Yeah, that's a really good question. So we addressed this a few times ago because I was wondering the same thing. So we always look at like the absolute numbers, right? We're like, okay, there's more PT jobs than there are OT jobs, but does that mean that the demand is more or not? And we actually went and looked into how many physical therapists are licensed in the United States versus how many occupational therapists are licensed, and how many physical therapist graduates are coming out of school each year versus occupational therapist graduates. And we actually did see that the numbers for OT are lower than PT.
I think it's around half, right? If I remember.
I can't remember exactly. I'd have to look back at the job numbers that we did for that. But that is a really good point. So in terms of the demand for the available jobs, it's actually not as big of a difference as you would think.
Yeah. I really don't think there's really that big of a difference in terms of demand because, well, I guess not, at least supply and demand. I don't think there's really as big a discrepancy as the job numbers would make it seem, because not only are there fewer OTs in general, but from our experience from going to the OT conference each year, the national conference, and also the PT conference, there's way less OTs interested in traveling than there are PTs interested in traveling. So yes, there might be 1,100 open PT jobs, but there might be 2,000 current traveling PTs, whereas there might only be 300 OT jobs, but there might only be 500 traveling OTs. So I think there's less of a discrepancy than it seems.
Yeah. But I will say anecdotally, like I mentioned, our friend Allie says that she's a long-time occupational therapist traveler, and she feels as though the availability of acute care jobs for OTs has declined.
It does depend on setting for sure.
Yeah, setting and location too. So, I think anecdotally you will see that there are some long-time therapists that feel like, it's a little harder. But I think in general, it's probably not quite as competitive as the numbers would make it out to look. Let's see, we have another comment here from you two for several years. Oh, I've learned a lot from you two for several years as I've dreamed of my husband and I semi-retiring into travel therapy within the next 1 to 2 years. I have 30 years of home health experience. Are there any travel mental health openings? Well, thank you for following along, and we are so glad to hear that you've learned a lot from us, and I hope that you and your husband will be able to semi-retire into a travel therapy career. We talk to a lot of folks that are at that stage of their career where they're ready to hit the road, explore the country, maybe the kids are out of the house. It is a really cool opportunity. We haven't seen a lot of jobs that are in the mental health space. That doesn't mean there aren't any, but definitely it's not like your main bread and butter of skilled nursing, hospital, outpatient, schools are the main ones. So I would definitely look into some of the bigger companies that might have those broad range of settings. All right. So a few more questions here that we addressed with the companies. We asked them, are new grads having luck getting placed? And specifically, we wanted to know about new grads within the different disciplines. So PT, OT, SLPs during their CF year.
So basically, across the board, every company that responded said that it's a good time to travel as a new grad PT, which we would agree with. We started as new grad PTs 10 years ago, and that market was way harder, and we had a pretty good experience anyway. And we've worked with now several thousand new grad PTs that travel and have had a good experience. So PTs definitely wouldn't hesitate traveling as a new grad right now. OTs, you need to make sure that you're a little bit more flexible, either on the setting that you want to go to or your location. A little bit harder, definitely, to find jobs that are specific. And then for SLPs, I would say at least for SLPs in their clinical fellowship year, most companies don't want to take clinical fellowship SLPs that are working towards that, unless it's a school-based contract. But even then, they're hesitant. The big reason for that is, travel contracts are short-term, and you need 9 months, and trying to find back-to-back contracts can be very difficult. So most companies don't think that it's a good idea for SLPs to travel until after they get their Cs, which we would agree with.
Yeah, and you're just not going to have the supervision hours that you need, so it's not going to usually be a good fit for you. Sure, you can make it work, but for the most part, it's probably a better fit for you to work somewhere more permanent for your CF year. Get your hours and get your supervision and make sure that you get your Cs. Once you have your Cs, then you'll be able to travel no problem.
Yeah.
If you did really want to take a travel contract, we recommend doing a school contract because you're going to have that stability for that full 9 months. And it's really kind of the same as doing a full school year at any location. You just might be traveling to a new location and getting paid a little higher than if you did a school contract in your hometown.
Yep.
I will say too, some of the recruiters mentioned, as a new grad, it really depends on the setting. If you're a new grad who's really wanting to work in hospital or like a one-on-one outpatient clinic, just realize that those jobs are very desirable, so they are going to have a lot of other candidates. It's just like anything with supply and demand. If they have a lot of other candidates, like if it's an outpatient one-on-one in San Diego, well, all the experienced physical therapists also want that job. So if they have a lot of applicants that have experience, well, you're going to get picked. They're going to pick over you for the experienced candidate. So it just makes sense, right? And then the same thing here. One of the companies who we know for a fact has a lot of hospital contracts said they don't see a lot of demand for new grads. And they said, if you want to be a new grad traveler, you have to be extremely flexible, even as a PT. Well, that's because from her perspective, she mainly works with hospital systems that decline new grads.
Yeah.
So yeah, it really depends on setting and location always. All right. And again, we have a couple other companies here. Like one of our other recruiters said, I love new grads. Bring me all the new grads. We have zero problem finding PT new grads jobs. However, we don't work with SLPCFs. And I know that recruiter personally. I know that company. And so when you guys reach out to us and ask for which companies that we would recommend, I know these nuances and I know which ones are good to send you to. So if you're a new grad, I'm going to be more likely to send you to this one that works well with new grads versus this one that has a lot of facilities that won't take new grads.
Yep.
All right, we're wrapping up here soon. So if you guys have any other questions that you'd like for us to answer, please leave those in the comments.
All right, so next was about PTAs and CODAs. We have quite a few assistants that watch these videos, so we're asking about how the market is for PTAs and CODAs. We already read the job numbers earlier, but in general, pretty much all the companies said that the PTA market is, it's been good and it seems to be improving. So I think compared to like 2019 levels, PTA travel demand is probably higher than we've ever seen it. CODA's still not as strong, but it is certainly better than it was 3 or 4 years ago. So improving for both, but PTA demand is a lot stronger than CODA demand.
Yep. So then we asked the companies if they had anything in general they'd like to share. So I'll read some of those to you. Some of these are just kind of all over the place. One of the companies said that they feel as though their model, the old school model of staffing, is still the way to go. They basically said that they are concerned with all these like technology companies popping up because they feel like they don't have as much human interaction with the therapist. So this recruiter, and actually she's not just a recruiter, she's one of the owners of the company. She said just to be wary of some of these new staffing agencies that you see popping up with job boards and posting certain rates, because you may not be getting what you're you may not be getting what you think you're getting.
Yeah.
Basically, she's saying like maybe they pay $1 more a week or $100 more a week, but what are you sacrificing? And yeah, this is kind of a difficult thing in this day and age of 2025. We've seen a lot of changes in the staffing space where there's so many more companies hopping on board these days, and some of them are going to provide good customer service and some of them are not. So you definitely have to be wary when you're looking at job boards and things and you're seeing all these new agencies come out of the woodwork and contact you, and they get a hold of your email and your phone, and you're like, wow, well, they're paying so much. But if you've never heard of them before and you can't find any reviews about them online, and you don't have a friend or a colleague who has recommended them, you could be getting yourself in a bad spot. Maybe they are paying more, but maybe if something bad happens on your contract, maybe they don't have good customer service. So it's just something to be aware of. You want to, maybe look at a well-rounded company who is also paying pretty good.
Yeah, and something you always have to remember too with companies is that when things are good, every company's going to be fine. Like if you just have a simple contract, it goes through, there's no issues, you don't have any problems, they don't have any problems with you, you're going to be like, wow, okay, I'll just always take the small company that pays really well. But when things really, when things go bad with contract cancellations or major issues with the facility, that's when you find out whether the company's really good or bad. And so we've worked with, I don't know, we've interviewed probably 30 or more companies now, and we only work with less than half of those because some of them, they sound great at first, but then they're not that great. And so you have to be really careful with that. And that's why for any of you guys that haven't started traveling yet, I'd be really careful about taking advice for companies or recruiters or whatever from somebody that's been traveling for a year or 6 months or a year and a half, because if all of their contracts have been really smooth and they're like, oh, wow, this is wonderful, this company's so good, this recruiter's wonderful. But a lot of recruiters are not as good when there's issues. Suddenly they don't respond for 2 days and you're freaking out. And so, you just want to make sure that you're getting connected with companies that are good and that have been around for a long time and they have experience with these problems, and they're going to work to resolve it quickly.
Yeah. One of the agencies asked, and this is a question for the audience, and I would be interested to know if you have something to share on this question. You could feel free to send us a message later on because we'd be interested to know too. He wants to know, I'm curious about the traveler mentality these days. I wonder if there are people that are traveling less or if there's just a more burnout happening, thus a reduced volume in therapists wanting to travel. And the reason why he's asking this is that there's so many agencies right now looking for therapists and they're not able to find enough therapists. And so they're wondering, are there actually less people traveling these days, or is there just more competition with a lot of agencies competing for the same therapists?
Yeah, I think it's a mix of a lot of things, but definitely being more companies makes things harder because now you have, when we started traveling, there was like probably 5 or 6 main companies, and now we work with 15 and there's like several hundred out there. Yeah. So it just makes things kind of difficult for everybody because there's just so many more options.
Yeah, but I mean, we love to talk about how great it is to be a travel therapist all the time. But we do try to share some of the good and the bad. There's definitely a lot of people that do get burnt out from traveling and crave more stability. If anyone wants to message us privately and share your story, maybe you decided to get out of traveling, you're feeling burnt out. We do talk to folks that say that kind of thing sometimes. So yeah, we'd be interested if there's someone who's maybe afraid to share that because they're like, I feel like I failed as being a traveler because it wasn't for me. We like to hear the good and the bad. We love to say, oh, traveling's so great, but sometimes it's not great for everybody. So let us know.
Yeah.
All right. One of the companies said, I would just like to remind the travelers about the basics. I believe you guys mentioned this in your previous videos, but you want to decide what's the most important for you between pay, location, and setting. You can usually get at least 2 of the 3, but it's much harder to find all 3.
Yeah.
Yeah, and we always mention that it's, setting, location, and pay. You can't always get all 3. Sometimes you can, but you definitely need to know which one's your main priority. Another company said, we are hearing from a lot of candidates that they're feeling overwhelmed with recruiter outreach and they're applying across multiple platforms. It is a crowded space, which means personal connection and standing out as a recruiter is more important than ever. We're consistently hearing that rates are not negotiable. Candidates may push back, but setting clear expectations up front will save time and frustration on both sides.
Yeah, again, it is very crowded now. And for any of you guys that are current travelers or aspiring travelers that don't know this yet, be very careful about putting your information out there to tons of different companies because you're just going to get just constantly inundated with calls, texts, emails. So be strategic and don't just enter your information for any job that sounds like it pays $4,000 a week, because it's probably a fake job and you're just going to get a bunch of calls and texts now that you can't get off of. So yeah, just be smart about who you give your information to.
Yeah, it's a double-edged sword, a lot of these websites out here, because sometimes you put your information out there and it's hard to get off these call lists.
For sure.
Another recruiter said, remind the therapist that communication is key. If you are working with other agencies, just be upfront with your recruiter and let them know, I am working with other agencies. If you do have, you're submitted to multiple jobs and you already have interviews lined up, just let your recruiters know that so that they know what to expect. We do recommend that you work with more than one company. We usually recommend about 2 or 3. Much more than that, it can just get really confusing for you, and it can get really dicey with all the different agencies, because if you're waiting to hear back from one interview and you agree to another interview and they make an offer, but you're saying, I need to wait to hear back on this one before I can agree to this offer or accept this offer, it can just get really tricky. So we recommend not getting submitted for more than about maybe 2 or 3 jobs at a time. You don't want to just be submitted to 20 jobs and be waiting on all these interviews. And sometimes they just will call you out of the blue and you're like, who is this? It's going to look unprofessional. It just gets really dicey. So just try to narrow it down and don't have too many things out at once.
And we had 2 companies that basically just said that flexibility is the key to travel, which we talk about that all the time. But, you know, you're not usually not going to get everything that you want. You need to be a little bit flexible for sure to be able to find positions.
And one of them even said, we recommend doing a research on housing and cost of living before you submit to a job. That is a good idea. You know, you don't always have time to really secure housing or know exactly about the housing availability, but just do a little bit of research, because it's really bad if you accept a job and then you realize you can't find housing and then you back out of the job because of that.
Yeah, so we recommend this in our course. We talked a decent amount about it, but in general, just when you are presented with a job and it sounds like it might be a good fit for you, before you even submit to that job, just take a cursory, oh shoot, probably ended after an hour. Take a cursory glance at what's available in terms of, what places there might be to find housing. So you don't have to secure housing, but go on Furnish Finder, go on Airbnb, and just make sure there's something available and that it's not $6,000 a month or something crazy. You just want to just be sure that there is something before you submit to a job.
What Jared was talking about there is our Instagram feed just ended for some reason. We don't know if it had like an automatic hour cutoff or if there was a bad connection, but sorry for those of you that were on Instagram listening. But there were a couple questions on Instagram that we were going to answer. One of them was if we need to send you a quick question, what's the best way to reach you? You can send us a message on Instagram, on Facebook, or send us an email at contact@traveltherapymentor.com. Or you can just go to traveltherapymentor.com and click on the contact us and fill out the form there. So there's a few different ways to reach out. One of the other questions was, what travel agencies do you recommend for occupational therapists? And the answer to that is it varies. We have different agencies that we recommend depending on your personal preferences. So if you go to traveltherapymentor.com/recruiters, that's where you can fill out our recruiter recommendation form. Or if you just go to traveltherapymentor.com, click on the menu and click on recruiter recommendations. I read each and every one of those forms. So if you fill that out, give us your name, what discipline you are, what settings you're interested in, what states you're interested in, what's important to you. Is it pay, mentorship, being in a very specific location? And then I'll take a look at all of that and recommend 3 different agencies that I think, not just agencies, but 3 different recruiters at 3 different agencies that I think would be a good fit for you. And then you have the opportunity to reach out to those 3 and set up phone calls and decide if you also agree that they're a good fit.
Yep.
So, all right. Well, if there are no more questions, then we'll wrap up for tonight. But hopefully this was helpful to you guys in kind of understanding what's happening with the job market right now. Again, it is a very strong travel therapy job market right now. It's a good time to get into travel therapy. Something else I wanted to mention that makes it even better right now for PTs and PTAs is the PT Compact. There are currently 35 states participating in the PT Compact, so it's better than ever to be able to utilize that if your home state is participating. Again, it's not required. If your home state is not participating, you can still be a traveler without it. But if you are eligible for the compact and the job market is so good, you have so many options. Unfortunately, the OT and the SLP compacts are not live yet, but they keep saying soon.
Yeah, they've been saying soon for like 5 years, so hopefully soon.
hopefully soon that will definitely open up more opportunities for those of you that will be eligible for the OT or the SLP compact.
Yep. What's up, Nick? Long time no see.
Yep. All right. Hope y'all are doing well, and thanks for joining. We are going to probably do a video soon talking about our move and our house. Just to give a little quick preview of that, we are in the process of selling our townhouse, and the house that we're currently living in, we're actually renting and not owning, which is going to be an interesting choice to discuss for a lot of folks that are very pro owning your home. So yeah, we'll maybe do a video talking a little bit about that in the coming weeks.
Yep. All right. Take care, everyone.
All right. Have a good night.